Hi everyone, my name is Holly Joy McCabe. I am a personal trainer, certified life coach, nutritionist, and a craniosacral therapist. And today I want to share a little micro version of my journey through sort of a westernized, what I would refer to as toxic diet culture and fitness culture, into integrating and finding balance and connection within my own body, and in taking that combination sort of hybrid approach to my work in the fitness industry. So I went on my first diet at 9 years old. There was a comment made to me that I was getting chunky as I was, maturing as a 9-year-old little girl. And I made the decision right then and there that I just wouldn't eat. And that started my war with, being at odds with my body and seeing it as something that I needed to control and restrict and sort of beat into submission. And early on, my technique and approach was just don't eat. Like, food is the enemy. Then I learned exercise and, kind of evolved there and started using exercise as one of the same control mechanisms of, I can eat this, but then I have to make up for it. I have to burn all this food off. I have to balance, the checks and balances were always 24/7 in my little 9-year-old mind. And that kind of evolved quite progressively into, my teenage years, into my early 20s. And the interesting thing is, even though I knew that I could be classified as someone with an eating disorder, early on, the more I got into health and fitness, the more I was kind of under the illusion that I was doing something really good for my body. Health and fitness are things that people, implement in their lives because it's self-care. They're taking care of themselves. But eventually I had to come to terms with the fact that there are very different degrees of implementing things like exercise and diets into your life. And the way I was doing it was incredibly toxic. It was basically my coping technique for dealing with feeling so out of control in my life through, again, into my early adulthood, into my 20s. The more out of control I felt, the more toxic relationships I was experiencing without the tools and everything, the more I tried to control and limit my food and exercise. And it's interesting because health and fitness, nutrition, all of that, that was my passion. The more I read, the more I learned from a textbook perspective, balanced nutrition, balanced exercise. But everything was still kind of coming through this toxic filter for me of, I'm at war with my body. I have to control my body. If I don't do this, bad things are going to happen. Again, it was just absolute war with my body. And in my early 20s, I took it to a new extreme and started training for fitness competitions. Basically, a fitness competition is where you diet and you exercise like crazy and you get your body as lean and shredded as possible. And then you go stand on a stage and you invite in the judges and the world to pick apart every little flaw. Needless to say, not something that was very healthy for someone who was predisposed and had a history of eating disorders. Prior to that, I had actually gotten in a pretty balanced place with healthy eating and exercise and a little bit away from the extremes, but this kind of ignited it full circle for me. I mean, it really brought everything up. And through that entire process, basically, I sort of wrecked my body. I wrecked my mental health, my physical health. It was way more than my sort of vulnerable psyche could handle, and way more than my physical body could handle. And I eventually just kind of hit a brick wall. I mean, just complete breakdown. I could hardly get out of bed. I could hardly think right. I was so hypercritical of my body that once I stopped being able to exercise and gained some weight, I wouldn't leave the house. And it was around that time that I kept feeling like, this isn't it. Like, this cannot fall under the umbrella of health, even though I knew this was more of an extreme. I was like, this whole diet and exercise, there's got to be something missing, right? Like there's so much more. Something else is going on here. And I was kind of in a place where I was looking to evolve my career as well. I was personal training and doing nutrition at that time. And I kind of stumbled across massage therapy. Just researching different things that didn't take me 5-10 years to go to school for. And I honestly kind of had no concept of the healing arts as a whole. I knew massage from a traditional, as we call, fluff and buff, massage the muscles out, it's good for you. It's just a very limited perspective of what the healing arts even were. And one of the biggest blessings that I thank the universe for every day was the school that I was able to enroll in Nashville, called the Natural Health Institute. I was one of the last students that got to go through that school before it was bought out by a career college and, very commercialized. But the school that I got to enroll in was very Eastern based. We got to study amazing things like Eastern AMP and, Reiki and Lomi Lomi. And I will never forget the moment that I sat down into the somatic science class, having no idea what the word somatic meant. And I sit down, and one of the first things that comes up is just this mind-body connection and how our thoughts and emotions present with armoring patterns and these different archetypes in our bodies. Now, at the time, my entire back, like all of my erector muscles, were like a brick house. I mean, the muscles were this thick. Throughout my childhood trauma and abusive relationships, I had built this armor, and then it's almost like I had just solidified it with all of the training and exercise and lifting, just push, push, push. And so that one made sense to me right away, this armoring pattern, this having these basically rods in my spine. And from that moment on, it was like the entire universe just opened up to me. I was like, this is it. This is what's been missing. Like, nutrition and fitness are just these tiny little parts of this health perspective and spectrum, but they're missing so much. This whole mind thing, right? And keep in mind, this was 11, 12 years ago. So I've come a really long way, obviously, in my journey and in my professional and personal path. But at that moment, everything just kind of like made sense to me. It clicked, and I fell in love with this whole mind-body connection, somatic healing, this idea that emotions and patterns and things get stuck in our body and they can be released because they cause us so many different health problems. And I had originally been interested in massage therapy because of my physical symptoms. My muscles had just been overtrained so much, and I was spasming and twitching, and I couldn't sleep, and I knew my physical body needed help. But through that process, I learned how much my mental, emotional self needed help, and how those were so interrelated in terms of what I was experiencing, all the different symptoms that I was experiencing. And so that really started the process. And then I remember also the day that one of our teachers mentioned the upcoming classes, and you could choose. I don't remember what the other option was because I kind of blanked out after she mentioned and described craniosacral therapy. And literally the hair on my body just kind of stood up. It was like one of those energetic things that was like, whew, pull straight to that therapy. I was like, I don't know what that is, but I need that in my life. And that started my passion and absolute love affair with craniosacral. And what really appealed to me about that is I had a long history of sexual trauma and abuse throughout my life. And also with the learning this somatic aspect of things, like the muscles and everything that I was doing, I had a hard time with like physical touch. When you deal with things like eating disorders and body image issues and all of that, you don't see your body as yours. You almost see it as it's kind of this separate thing. You're not integrated, you're not in it. And so the idea of someone coming towards you can be very, very terrifying and scary. I was in a place where I was almost desperate enough to be open, but I also, up until that point where I was doing fitness competitions, I would wear big hoodies and long pants. Like, I didn't show any skin. I just wanted I wanted a layer between me and the world, because that's what felt safe. Like, I had to have that. When it comes time to suddenly take off all your clothes and get on a table and have a stranger touch you, that was very challenging for me. And what I really fell in love with about craniosacral, and I could see the connection for people that struggled with things that I had struggled with, was obviously the safety element of it. You can stay clothed, you can be under a blanket, it's very non-invasive, it's very gentle, and that helped me really learn that I could facilitate that internal sense of safety in that environment, where that was much harder in the other modalities like deep tissue and Swedish. Like, I felt very, very vulnerable. And there was a day that in class we were working on lower extremities and hips, and someone kind of just came straight in and dug their thumbs right into my hips. And I instantly just felt triggered, and like that fear, that fight or flight feeling just triggered. I had a huge emotional response, and I had to get up and, go to the bathroom and just compose myself. I was crying, and we had learned about somatic release and emotional release, but that still, even in a practice environment, was very difficult for me. So I found craniosacral to be my safety zone. I can move through things at my own pace. The idea of letting my body take the lead and just breathing, I think that was the first time in my life that I had ever sort of been presented with this idea of you can just be and things can happen. Because fitness culture and diet culture is all about like do, restrict, push. Like, it's just that no pain, no gain that, for me, the longer I've been in the fitness industry, the more I've seen that sort of backwards approach of it's you against your body. And my whole career since this moment of venturing into the healing arts has been about integrating you with your body, helping you become one with your body, feeling safe in your body, using intuition, tapping in, all of the elements of craniosacral, but kind of taking that approach and that philosophy and also implementing it in nutrition and fitness, because that is severely lacking in the modern fitness world and diet culture and everything else. So for me, that was one of the most powerful elements. And I knew the direction that I wanted to take my business of combining this, body work, somatic healing, mind-body connection, and health and fitness. I knew that that was going to be a huge calling for a lot of other people too. Over the years, many of you can probably relate to, you've heard these horror stories of people saying, yeah, I got a massage once and it was terrible and I was sore for days and they nearly ripped my arm off because they were stretching. And I have had many unfortunate traumatic experiences on a massage table by this kind of same we got to force the body into submission approach that I think conventionally trained therapists are sort of subject to, just like the fitness industry. Again, there's trainers that pride themselves on being able to make clients throw up in a workout, which is just asinine to me. And I've seen that in the massage world and stuff as well, where it's like the more you can hurt somebody, the more pain you can inflict on somebody, the more helpful or beneficial it is. And I think that is equally as detrimental to someone who's trying to heal in general, but much less someone who has dealt with body image issues, vulnerability, sexual assault and abuse, and just had this overarching theme of being at odds with their body, and their body is not a safe place. With eating disorders and sexual traumas, which are both very interrelated, the individual has this innate sense of my body is not safe. My body is not a safe place to be, so I need to be at war with it, or I need to disassociate from it, or be as far away from it as I possibly can. That was my experience. My path to healing involved a lot of different things. It involved various different therapies and self-work and reflection and growth and, all of that. But I think one of the most pivotal parts was a modality that allowed me to just be and let my body take the lead for the first time in my entire life. And again, I think this has been one of the most powerful ways that I've utilized this work and who I work with, because most of these people with these complex traumas and a lot of people think that eating disorders, they have this one look and it's really extreme and the person's emaciated and it's very recognizable. I think there's a big lack of understanding of how prominent disordered eating patterns are, body dysmorphia, and all of these different elements are with the everyday woman. I've been in the fitness industry for 15 years and worked with thousands of clients, and it's rarely the case that somebody doesn't have some element of that. So I think that implementing body work and craniosacral and cultivating that sense of safety instead of being at odds is an absolute pivotal part of the health spectrum as a whole, utilizing movement, connecting people back with their inner self, and basically integrating and ending that cycle, that destructive cycle of I'm at war with my body is not safe. And that's a little bit about my own personal journey and story, utilizing it. And again, I've had great success with hundreds of clients over the years implementing these different perspectives and protocols as well. So I hope this talk was inspiring for you. If you know